IP. I'm doing a little bit of a different video today than I normally do. I'm here with Evid3nc3, Vassal of God, and Maximus Confessor may join us a little bit later. But I, over the past couple months, I've been getting a lot of arguments similar to the video we're going to be reviewing today. And a couple people have actually sent me this video recently. It's an older video, but they've sent me the video trying to say that this kind of disproves Christianity and Judaism on the outset. It's a video by atheist YouTuber Evidence, and he tries to argue that the Old Testament stories are all based on a pagan religion. And when I first saw this video, I wanted to hit my head against the desk, and I was like, I got to do something. I got to do a response, because not only does it need to be done, it's just so easy. It's just, there's so many errors in this video, I don't even know where to begin. So I asked a couple of guys to help me with this, and I figured we could do a little Google Hangout and go through this video a little bit points by points. So I'm here with Labram, who also goes by the name of Albert. Well, what is your overall take of this video?
My overall take is that it's pretty much a regurgitation of Karen Armstrong's work, which is not exactly something that I'm terribly thrilled with. I think the best thing might be to actually, as we start going through it, because there's so many points where you can point things out, I think it's, when we start going through it, I think it'll be clearer. It's hard to explain until you start getting into it.
Exactly. Vassal, what is your overall take of this video?
Well, I think that there are some parts where he did point out things which are true, such as Abraham was most likely not a monotheist, but a monolatrist.
Right.
But he takes that, like, that's not an argument against monotheism. The fact that people who are in a book which is known for being a major monotheistic religion wasn't a monotheist, because it completely ignores what's called progressive revelation.
Correct.
God didn't reveal every single thing about that he revealed through the rest of the Bible in the book of Genesis.
Right, and I think he takes these points that are true and he runs wild with them to the extreme opposite end of what they're saying. And I think once we start the video, we'll go through with that. So you guys are ready. I was going to hit play and we can start going through this and breaking it down. So, all right.
The God we know, the God of the Western world, the God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, has a history. Modern evidence indicates that if you read the Bible as a...
All right, I got to stop right off the bat. What he did was he held up a book by Karen Armstrong. Okay, Karen Armstrong is not a scholar. She's a layman at best. Yes, she's a member of the Jesus Seminar, I believe, but she's got a lot of ideas that a lot of even skeptical scholars have challenged her on. And to cite her as like your primary book you're going to go from is not a good place to start.
And I don't think that he actually cites anyone else throughout the rest of this video. He just cites her.
I don't think so. I mean, Albert, have you heard any mainstream scholars who take a lot of what Karen Armstrong says seriously?
No, I haven't.
I didn't think so.
Well, the thing that amazes me in this is that, well, first of all, I think it should be pointed out that while there were some very qualified scholars in the Jesus Seminar, a lot of them really were not top-rate scholars. There were people there who didn't have academic tenure anywhere. It basically, the Jesus Seminar was David Funk picking people who would agree with him for the most part.
Yeah.
So. Oh yeah, I kind of agree with you, so we picked her, and that was pretty much it.
Exactly. So, all right, let's move on.
It is currently presented by modern religion, especially if you are reading an English translation. You aren't reading the real story. What you are reading is an edited version of that history, with additions and modifications that present that story in a different way than the evidence indicates it actually happened. According to the Bible, this God has always existed, and this God predated not only human beings, but the universe itself. According to the evidence, this God began evolving from human ideas originating from 14,000 years ago, and
Go ahead.
Okay, this is kind of dumb. So, here's the thing. Just because the form of the way we think of God, philosophically, like say, the God that Thomas Aquinas was trying to prove, didn't first appear as we think of him in historical records until this time, does not mean that he never existed during that, like before that.
Exactly.
That's the definition of a non sequitur.
Yeah, and it's also the idea that the forgetting of the revealed revelation. I mean, all of God's revelation is not supposed to be revealed up in front. I mean, this is something that the Jews uncovered over time and is not finally revealed until Christ comes about. So this is not a good argument off the bat.
Yeah. And it basically, and a lot of what happens, is particularly with Armstrong's work, is that everyone agrees on the evidence, on what archaeologists have found, but what she'll do is present a particular interpretation and not give the other side of the story. So you're seeing a completely one-sided presentation, and particularly in this video, it's just a regurgitation of Armstrong. You're seeing this one-sided interpretation without addressing what other people have said about it that disagree with her interpretation.
Right, and he presents it as fact as we go along, so let's just keep going along and we'll see that.
Didn't become the one God of monotheism until 2,600 years ago, in 600 BCE. If you want to know the story that the evidence presents, the story understood and supported by the majority of religious studies professors, archaeologists, and anthropologists, the place to begin is not the Bible. It is the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation story.
Go ahead, Albert.
Yes. The first thing when he was saying this began in 600 BC, well, one of the problems you get, of course, is that prior to that time, I can't remember the name. There was a piece of a little prayer that was inside an amulet that they found that actually predated this time period. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes, I am vaguely.
Yeah, the blessing, the priestly blessing in Numbers. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously that pre-existed this, and that's referring to a single God. So, well, how can you say it started at this time period?
Well, if
it's already being written down.
Right, it's picking and choosing the parts that are true and adding in the lies. It's the same thing throughout the entire video. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Story, which was discovered by archaeologists in the library of Ashurbanipal and dated to have originally been written in about 1750 BCE. As this creation story demonstrates, almost all religions in Mesopotamia at that time were polytheistic. There is no trace of the existence of monotheistic Judaism at this time.
Okay, I'm going to stop here because that's not a good argument. I mean, for example, the Bible.
That's a duh point.
I know, it's like obviously. I mean, if you read Joshua 24:2, it tells us that Abraham and his father Terah were worshiping pagan gods, and then in the book of Genesis, it is God who calls him out of that to be a monolatris. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that wrong. I pronounce words wrong all the time, but
I say monolatrist.
Monolatris. We'll go with that. But yeah, that's right in there. If Christianity is true, we would expect this to be true. It's not a problem, but he's presenting it like it's a huge revelation thing. So.
In the Enuma Elish, Marduk, champion of the Babylonian gods, defeats chaos in the form of the dragon Tiamat, and then together, the Babylonian gods form the world. In the Babylonian story, the primordial world is described as formless and void. Also in the Babylonian story, light, the firmament, dry land, the sun and moon, and mankind are created in order. These details are important because, as we will see, 1,150 years later, when the Israelites are exiled to Babylon, these details become edited into both the book of Isaiah and the story of Genesis.
Okay, how does he know that? How does he know when they were added in? How does he know that, oh, this is the original part and this is the parts that were added in later? I mean, how does he know that? He never says.
he only because someone said that we know that this is it. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I haven't actually read Karen Armstrong's work, but I've seen other people like mirror it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never actually seen like arguments from the text to like say this is how we know that this was edited in and this was part of the original. I'm thinking, well, if like, how do you know that the original wasn't just like? What do you think the original wasn't just edited in, and that was the part, and that was the part from earlier? You can't like just have two different varying textual styles and say we know which one came later.
Right. So, and the idea that this is the creation account that they stole is, first of all, it's just assuming that the Bible was the later version, and it was, you know, just assuming it was edited later in, but it's also kind of forgetting that from like an old Earth creationist or a theist evolutionist standpoint, this is not an issue because, you know, as you know, the apologist J.P. Holding has put out, I mean, the Jews and Christians would triumphantly reclaim pagan ideas, pagan you know, books or words or practices, and triumphantly reclaim them and make them good so that Christians or Jews could use them. I mean, the book of Proverbs seems to be taken from the instruction of Amahop, and that's not an issue. That's just what you would do in the ancient world.
Yeah, I mean, the book of Proverbs is taken from all sorts of different pagan philosophers, like, well, maybe not philosophers, but like sages, I guess you could say.
Go ahead, Albert.
Well, one thing that's never brought up is that, for example, and I'm sure you've heard of the Ten Commandments. Well, of course they've been around for. It isn't as though God put these precepts down on stone, and the Jews were sitting around going, "You mean we're not supposed to cheat on each other and take each other's wives? And you mean we're not supposed to kill each other?
It's.
You mean we're not supposed to steal? Oh my God, I never knew that."
Yeah, it's. I mean, the Jews took from pagan ideas. I mean, that's not an issue. That's what we would expect if the Bible was true. It's not somehow like a terrible thing. Like this is the first time it ever came about.
Well, and in particular, let's consider, let's say, the figure of Solomon, and the wisdom. Well, the way that you would impress other people with your wisdom is not to come up with sorts of novel things, but to know. But in that culture, it would be if you knew what all the other wise people knew. That
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be a huge line drawn between how modern culture like thinks of people as really.
As its first chapter.
Oh.
The first.
Sorry, I hit that accidentally. Go ahead.
Okay, I think that there needs to be a huge line between how we would normally consider someone smart and how people in ancient times considered someone smart. You see, ancient people had a very, very high view of tradition. It didn't matter what culture you were in. In fact, the older an idea was, and the fact that it still stuck around, the more likely they thought it was to be true. If you came up with like a novel idea, then it was less likely to be true.
Yeah.
It's something that people had been considering true for a long time.
Yeah. And for me specifically, and I know for a lot of theistic evolutionists like myself, we have no problem saying the creation account was triumphantly reclaimed from pagan creation accounts in order to contrast them to show that the world they argued for was theologically created for good purposes by a good God against the pagan. I mean, it's not an issue if you look at it as poetry in that sense, so it's not an issue for us. No.
Yeah, it would only perhaps be an issue if someone took every single thing literally.
Exactly. Yeah.
As in a linear fashion. But when people sometimes read certain genres of literature in the Bible, they read them the way they would read a recipe for making cake. You do step 1, step 2, step 3, and in the ancient world, that's not how people thought.
Exactly. So.
In the modern world, that's normally not how people think.
Well, no, it's only with the Bible. Yeah. But all right, let's keep going.
Chapter of the entire Hebrew Torah and Christian Bible. Our next point of interest is the Canaanite religion, which archaeologists have reconstructed from clay tablets found in Ugarit, an ancient port city in Syria, and whose stories are dated to have originally been written before 1200 BCE. The Canaanites were also polytheistic. Of the many gods the Canaanites worship, 3 in particular are important to the rest of the story. They are El Elyon, whose name means literally God Most High, and who is believed to have been the father of the other gods. Asherah, El Elyon's wife, and Baal, who is both god of storms and fertility. The god Yahweh of Israel and the culture of Israel itself still show no signs of existence in the archaeological record. Yet some...
Yeah, I was going to stop anyway, but go ahead.
Again, another duh point. You can't have the God of Israel without Israel being there.
Exactly. They were in Egypt, prior to this, So and also, I'd also like to point out, of course, there's not going to be anything in the archaeological evidence. What is this? What is the second commandment? Thou shalt not make a graven image. We're not going to find any graven images of Yahweh because they weren't allowed to make them.
Not to mention that, are we supposed to be finding archaeological evidence of Abraham? Is that what we're supposed to be? Are we supposed to be finding these great monumentous structures and writings from a village?
He was a shepherd or a herder.
Yeah.
It's not as though you're going to find that sort of thing until the kingdom comes. The kingdom of Israel later, that you're actually going to get major.
Yeah, exactly. It's not until that, and that's when you start to see it come out. But you can even find evidence in Egypt. And if you check out the documentary Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, they go over a lot of evidence in Egypt for Israelite activity there. So that's not an issue either. Well, let's keep moving ahead, unless you guys want anything else to add.
Nope.
Okay.
Time over the next 500 years, the culture of Israel must have evolved, because it is at this time, from 950 to 850 BCE, that the contemporaries J and E began writing their independent accounts of the history of the people of Israel, which would later be combined into a single story. Beginning in Genesis chapter 2, none of what J or E writes aligns with the accounts of the Babylonians or Canaanites, whose accounts predated them by hundreds of years. Because of this...
Go ahead.
Okay, listen to what he says. At this point in time, none of the accounts of these guys align with any of the gods who predated them. What do you think? I'm trying to wonder what he's trying to imply with that. Because I feel like that would go the other way.
I think he's trying to imply that they have archaeological proof that pagan gods were worshipped before Israel. Therefore, somehow Israel was an early pagan group. I don't know. What do you think, Albert?
Well, the other thing is, he's making these, let's say, the expressions, El was a generic term for deity. So it's not that surprising that other people who also speak a Semitic language also use El to refer to a general idea of deity.
Exactly. I mean, it'd be like saying that Muslims and Christians worship the same deity because we both call him God. It's just a generic term to title for the creator. And this is, you see this a lot, and I get this comment all the time. Canaanites worshipped El. The Israelites stole worship of El. And I'm like, no, they just stole the name. It's the title. It's not the actual God.
Romans worshipped deuses, or dei. That means that since Christians often referred to God as Deus, they must have stolen the concept of God from the Romans.
Yeah, exactly.
And because of the nature of the stories...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead, Albert. He just muted himself. You gotta unmute.
Yeah, I was just making the comment. Well, according to them, we steal from everyone. So I'm not exactly sure who is it that we're supposed to.
I think he froze. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I think he.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Experiencing technical difficulties.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Albert. I mean, they say we stole from everyone, and so nothing's original, and of course the evidence they back up for this is always flaky. So, but let's keep going on.
The stories told. The most reasonable inference appears to be that these accounts were entirely mythical stories that the Israelites used to explain the world around them and find meaning in its cultural climate. But that all changes at Genesis chapter 12 with the story of Abraham. It is here that we finally find a connection with the religion of the Canaanites. We can see in the Hebrew version of the Torah that Abraham is said to worship El Shaddai, one of the names for the Canaanite god El Elyon. Abraham interacts with El Elyon in very personal ways that mirror the other pagan religions of the time. For example, in Genesis 18, El Elyon visits Abraham in human form and talks to him in person. His descendant Jacob has similar experiences, where he climbs to the top of a ladder to heaven and talks to El Elyon in a dream. Later, Jacob wrestles with El Elyon. Also from the Hebrew text, we can see that based on these experiences, Jacob makes El Elyon his Elohim, which is a term from the Canaanite religion, which meant Jacob was making El Elyon his primary god. The only way that...
Yeah, that's obvious, but the idea that El Elyon and a Canaanite god are the same thing is ridiculous, as we just went over. It's just a title for like we use the word God today. It's just a title for a deity. It doesn't add up. And of course, as we opened up in the beginning of this, I mean, you were talking about how monotheism wasn't really what a lot of scholars look at when they look at the Old Testament, weren't you, Vassal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
yeah.
I was looking through my Old Testament because I have the Revised Standard Version. I know for a fact that, like, all throughout the story of Abraham, it actually tells you that Abraham, because it has textual notes, it actually tells you that Abraham, or the text calls God El Shaddai.
Yeah. Well, they were monolateralists, and that basically is the idea that, yeah, there's other so-called heavenly beings, but you're really only worshiping one of them. And I like the way that scholar John Mackenzie says it. Here's a quote from him. He says, "In the ancient Near East, the existence of divine beings was universally accepted without question. The question was not whether there was only one Elohim, but whether there was any Elohim like Yahweh." And John Day points out these other so-called deities would have been reduced to the mere idea of angels or fallen angels by the time the revelation was later revolved. But even today, we don't doubt that there are other heavenly beings. I mean, we just don't worship them, and neither did did Abraham or the other early Hebrews.
And one more thing, I find it weird that he never makes mention of the fact that the Hebrew word Yahweh is still used in parts of the Bible even earlier than Abraham.
And
in Abraham.
Oh, he gets to that later. He tells us they were added in. Trust me, we get to that point.
No, that's not possible because there are several verses where both Elohim and Yahweh is used in the same breath.
Oh, I know, but he will tell you. When we get towards the end, he'll tell us that was added in later.
If that's not a double standard, I don't know what is.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
That the usage of this term makes sense as if Jacob believed that El Elyon was just one god of many, and that Jacob was committing to this one god in order to receive special protection. In other words, it becomes clear from the terms used in the God they worshipped that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were polytheists or pagans, just like their pagan contemporaries in Canaan and Babylon. The worship of El Elyon fades from the Hebrew text as we enter Exodus, where he is replaced by Yahweh, who's...
Go ahead, Albert.
Okay. One minute.
You just muted yourself.
Rapid fire muting.
Go ahead.
Every time it mutes back for some reason. Hopefully it'll stay this time. It's kind of funny how he mentions that Abraham, first he states that Abraham has decided to focus on this one God, and then with the next breath he says they're polytheists. Excuse me?
Yeah, well No, they were monolatrous. I mean, we've been over this. I mean, the existence of heavenly beings does not imply polytheism. It implies you agree there are possibly other things you could worship, but there's only really one God worthy of worship. And this is the idea of taking the little bit of truth he has and then blending it with these unbelievable lies that are just not there. So, let's continue.
Said to have rescued the Hebrews from slavery in Egypt. The story of Exodus, particularly in its modern interpretation in the animated film, The Prince of Egypt, depicts ancient Egyptians as the ultimate assholes, viciously enslaving an entire race for the sole purpose of...
Go ahead, yeah, I'm right there with you.
I just wanted to say, I concur with him on this point. This is definitely not what ancient Egypt was like for the Israelites.
But notice what he does, and he's about to do this. As you know, he gets his
Therefore,
theology.
The story of Exodus is false.
Yeah, he gets his.
Non sequitur.
This is what happens when you get your theology from a cartoon and not from scholars, and that's what he's going to say.
Or from the Bible itself.
Yeah, let's listen to that part because it just gets really bad here.
Erecting colossal monuments to their own glory. While it is a moving story of triumph and deliverance from oppressive circumstances, on a historical level, it contradicts the modern archaeological evidence that we have for the inner workings of ancient Egyptian culture, particularly their slave ownership practices. Modern archaeological evidence indicates that the workers who built all of the large monuments in Egypt.
Okay, so hold on one second, Albert. Your mic is unmuted. There you go.
From pyramids to sphinxes, were well-paid Egyptian citizens.
Okay, so yeah. Okay, the Bible never says that the Hebrews were building ancient monuments. It never says that the Hebrews were building pyramids or temples. It says they were making bricks. That's it. It doesn't say they were the ones who were constructing these things.
What's funny about this whole thing is that he seems to be insisting that, like, throughout those 400 years of when the Bible records the Israelites being in Egypt, he seems to be implying that, like, they were being tortured in the way that this cartoon is displaying it. I'm thinking, I've just read through the Torah. Well, I'm about 75% of the way through. I'm doing like a full read through of the Bible, but anyway, if you read throughout Numbers and even throughout Exodus, you find that the Israelites are constantly saying, "Oh, I wish we could be back in Egypt. Our lives were so much better there." True, they might have done like harsh disciplinary practices, which I have a hard time believing that they didn't do. That's pretty much how the ancient worlds did things back then. But
it's not as bad as he thinks, basically.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. So.
Of course, they were well fed and had. Of course, they were well fed and were like respected as other human beings. It's just that they were still treated harsh. They were still treated harshly, and God and Yahweh had a responsibility because of the fact that he essentially signed a social contract to the nation to free them. That was the whole reason of why the Exodus happened.
Yeah, go ahead, Albert.
He froze again.
He froze. Well, yeah, I mean, if you just look, Exodus 1:14 says they were making. It doesn't say they were making monuments. It says they were making bricks so the Egyptians could build things. It never says in the text that they were building pyramids or monuments. This is what happens when you get your theology from cartoons and not what the Bible actually says.
Yeah, I do find it rather amusing that he's terribly upset that the archaeological record doesn't fit with Walt Disney, but that's just me.
Yeah, I know. All right, let's keep going.
Who were given good housing, fed well, given good medical care, and given honorable burials. Further, while, like many ancient civilizations, the Egyptians did own some slaves, there's no evidence that they ever owned the magnitude purported by the Bible, or otherwise systematically enslaved an entire race. While the account of Exodus appears to have been largely mythical, its telling nonetheless reveals the polytheistic worldviews of J and E.
All right, just for real quick, if anyone has not seen it, there's a documentary out called Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, and they go through a lot of evidence for the Exodus, and what they basically argue is that the reason why we don't find any evidence is because we're dating the Exodus to the wrong kingdom. They argue it dates to the Middle Kingdom, not the New Kingdom as it's traditionally dated. And if you look for evidence there, you actually do find a lot. And I went to the documentary with a skeptical eye, thinking it's going to be like an older documentary called Exodus Decoded, which was not that good. But they actually do present a lot of evidence, and they do present Egyptian records with Semitic names for slaves, and a lot, quite actually, names that would reflect the 12 tribes as well. So, the idea there's no evidence is been challenged, and it is debated. It's not like this is like unanimous. Anything you guys want to add?
Well, I mean, I might have missed this, but did you mention the fact that the idea of the Israelites not being recorded in Egyptian records comes as no surprise if the Exodus were true? Because the Egyptians had like a history of deleting embarrassing moments in their history.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So why would we not expect for them to, not want to talk about that?
And that's not coming that statement doesn't actually come from an apologetics book. That comes from a random ancient Egypt mysteries book from an Egyptologist that I was reading.
I know. Well, they automatically assume it's not true. They automatically assume it's guilty until proven innocent. And, for example, you could apply that, if you apply that to other ancient works, we'd have to dismiss so much. Like, we have no evidence Hannibal ever crossed the Alps. We only know it because it's in records. But if we were to apply that same standard to other ancient works, we'd have to dismiss so much of history. It doesn't work. So
yeah, and if it actually happened, we should expect to find elephant skeletons all over the place.
Exactly. But no, they won't apply that standard. It only applies to the Bible and Scripture. Well, let's keep going.
After the Hebrews are rescued by Yahweh from the Egyptians, we can see even in the English translations of Exodus that they sing, "Who is like you among gods, Yahweh?" And, "Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all other gods." Now I know that...
Hey, Albert, can you mute your mic or turn your volume down? Thanks.
Exodus also established Yahweh as Israel's war god, calling him a great warrior who delivered them from Egypt.
Okay, apparently... Are you still having a mic problem?
Yeah, he just muted himself. Alright, keep going.
As the Torah progresses, its polytheistic nature compounds. After arriving in the Promised Land, no longer in need of help in war, but rather desiring to prosper in peace, the Israelites begin to worship once again the Canaanite fertility gods Baal and Asherah.
Okay, stop. Yeah, that's what the Book of Judges says happened. It says they were chasing after false gods constantly. Like, if the Bible is true, I would expect to find a lot of archaeological evidence that the Hebrews were worshiping false gods or pagan gods, because that's what the prophets were constantly yelling at them for.
Someone is like talking about how I remember in a hangout, someone was saying something like, if you read the Old Testament, then it looks as though like God is this great and powerful being to the Israelites, and He's the only one being worshipped. Whereas that's not what archaeology says. And I'm like, what Bible are you reading?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's kind of funny. Like when you'll hear someone like Karen Armstrong's, or some archaeologists may say, we found these little statuettes of Asherah. It's like, well, have you actually read the Bible, the Old Testament? Yeah, we're familiar with that name. It's in there.
Yeah, I know. It's like it's.
Have you read the book you're trying to disprove?
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, the other thing is,
Go ahead. Just muted yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I'm obviously having mic problems here. It just keeps turning off and on randomly. If they were in fact polytheists all the time, you would expect to see temples to these polytheistic gods all over the place also, and you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, but we do find evidence that they were worshiping false gods. I mean, that's expected if the Bible was true, so.
Reading a history of God, verses like this made no sense to me. In the English translation of the Bible, the Hebrews are presented as choosing between the Lord, Baal, and Asherah. How could the Hebrews be such idiots? Why wouldn't they worship the one God of all creation?
Question.
The picture looks different when the God...
Sorry, what?
Are you guys using the YouTube app?
Yes.
And you're recording this live, correct?
No, we're not recording it live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, we're recording it for screen capture, and then we're going to post it later because the YouTube app doesn't record live with it. So,
okay, cool.
Okay. Real quick on this. Why would they worship false gods? Well, I mean, I've heard this pointed out so many times by scholars. It's the basic point that if you worship the pagan god, you could worship them and then get things for it. So it's very tempting for the Israelites to worship false gods in the hopes that they'll get rewards given back to them. Whereas So you would set up a pagan idol to worship these false gods. With Yahweh, you had to go to the temple, and he was God. You could not set up a pagan like idol statue of Yahweh in your house where he would have to work for you if you made enough sacrifices. So that's not an argument that works.
God you're supposed to be worshipping is Yahweh Sabaoth, which means the God of the armies. Yahweh started as basically the Hebrew version of the Greek god Ares. No wonder he was obsessed with war and death.
Okay, how does he know this too? I mean, is he going to ignore the rest of the Hebrew names of God, like Yahweh Nisi, Yahweh Ra, Yahweh Rapha, Yahweh Shammah? I mean, Yahweh Jireh, Yahweh Shalom, the Lord of Peace. I mean,
Or I do like the fact that he seems to be trying to contrast that with our modern conception of God. I don't think he's ever been to a Catholic Mass before. We sing, Holy, 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 Lord God of Hosts. Or in the Latin, Dominus Sabaoth. That's the same word.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the name.
In answer to your question, yes, he is.
Yeah, it's the same argument. And the idea that God was bloodthirsty has been challenged by scholars like Paul Copan, who wrote an excellent book, if anyone's interested, called Is God a Moral Monster? And he goes through and he handles this stuff.
In the Old Testament. That was back when he was still just their god of war.
Add one more thing to
Now the picture made sense.
Means the powers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. There's kind of a distinction that people miss. They think that the Bible has a God who's purely monotheistic and there's nothing else comparable. Well, actually, the term that's better used is to say that I forget it, but basically it's that there are many powers within the Jewish tradition where God is, on top and the most powerful, but there are angels, hosts, and other beings who are right up there, who are part of the heavens in general.
Hey, Artie, who invited you? I'm just curious.
Oh, I'm Epi, or Maximus.
I thought so. I wasn't sure. You just didn't look the same. So, welcome.
My other account doesn't work for some reason.
Okay, well, no problem. We're going to keep going through this. If you need me to stop, just hit stop. Tell me to hit stop on the side. So, Maximus Confessor has joined us. So,
like the ancient Greeks, the Hebrews had a pantheon of gods they worshipped, or at least the gods Yahweh, Baal, and Asherah. We have archaeological evidence of the polytheistic nature of early Israelite culture in one of our earliest archaeological artifacts from Israel, from 1000 BCE, a polytheistic cult stand from Tanakh. Despite their polytheism, there were among the Israelites some with an unusually strong devotion to Yahweh in particular, who are now referred to as Yahwehs. In times of peace, there was little motivation for the people of Israel to give much weight to the opinions of such radical devotees of Yahweh. But times of upheaval...
I just want to say, this is already true if the Bible's true. I mean, if you read the book of Judges, that's what we would expect. They worship pagan gods in times of peace in hopes they could get more because there's no need. And then in times of war, of course, they're going to go back to the God who has rescued them in the past from Egypt. This does not mean that Yahweh is the God of war only, especially since the God calls him several names.
Yeah. Such as, he exists. That's what Yahweh means.
Yeah. It's taking the little bit of data you have and running wild with it and putting out this giant theory that is not supported in the text, but you need it to, so you take those little pieces and you build a monument out of it. So,
evil accelerated their opinions to the forefront of Hebrew culture. After the death of King Jeroboam II in about 750 BCE, the northern kingdom of Israel was in a state of near anarchy. On top of this, it was well known that Assyria wished to capture Israel in its moment of weakness. From this state of upheaval, 3 prophets arose, Isaiah, Amos, and Hosea. All 3 of them cried for devotion to Yahweh and disparaged the worship of other gods.
I have a quick point on this. Okay, if Yahweh is just one pagan god of a plethora of pagan gods, why are these random people just calling him to worship the god of war only? In what context would that make sense? If you're pagans, I mean, when would the Greeks have just said, hey, let's just worship Ares only?
It's sort of like earlier when he mentioned there was this group who had this peculiar devotion to Yahweh. Yes, they're called monotheists. I mean,
Yeah, it's just it's taking a little bit of data and running wild with it again.
In their prophecies, we can see how each of their versions of Yahweh had been created in their own image. Isaiah, a member of the royal family, had seen Yahweh as a king. Amos, a shepherd, had described his own empathy with the suffering poor to Yahweh. Hosea, who was suffering through marriage problems, saw Yahweh as a jilted husband who still continued to feel a yearning tenderness for his wife.
That does not sound like a god of war at all to me.
I was just about to say that. Like, seriously, how many people compared Ares to a husband who is being misused by his wife, the Greeks?
Right. It's starting to find little contradictions in his points here, where he's just kind of going kind of crazy with things. So it's ridiculous. And this idea that they're all painting Yahweh differently, that doesn't add up, because the view is that God is a one-dimensional being. He either has to be one of these. Why can't he be all three? I could write a book about George Washington being a great leader of the country who founded this nation, who inspired his troops, and someone else could write a book about George Washington about how he lost every battle. He never wanted to be the president. He cried when New York fell. Those would be kind of two different pictures, and they would both be true. Why do they have to contradict just because someone is focusing on different aspects?
Because he said so.
Yeah, it's because that's the aspect they want to talk about. That's basically it.
Yeah. Oh, moving on.
Israel. Ultimately, their outcry did nothing to save the northern tribes, and they fell to Assyria in 711 BCE. But their words lived on in Hebrew scripture and the Hebrew imagination. The cult of Yahweh received another boost during the rule of King Josiah in 622 BCE. Unlike his predecessors, who welcomed an open pagan vision, Josiah was a strict Yahwist. Like the prophets before him, Josiah was convinced that Judah's social problems came from a lack of devotion to Yahweh. During renovations to the temple, Josiah's high priest Hilkiah discovered a lost book of the law, which was alleged to have been authored by Moses. This book was Deuteronomy, and given its conveniently timely discovery, as well as its linguistic features, the majority consensus of biblical scholars such as Richard Elliott Friedman is that it was a forgery.
It's not unanimous that this is the way it is. I mean, there's so much debate about not only the documentary hypothesis, but where Deuteronomy was written, that you just can't reduce it to just like one or two lines and be done with it. What do you think, Albert?
Yeah, it's the thing is that the problem is when you're dealing with scholars, it's which scholars. I can find scholars to agree on just to take which group of scholars you want to talk to. Do you want to talk to the liberal scholars, the conservative scholars, the moderate scholars? And each of them will give you a different interpretation of how the Torah was formed. There's this idea that there's universal agreement. Yes, if you reduce it to the people who agree with you, there's going to be universal agreement.
Yeah.
But otherwise, not really.
And to be honest, I've read several articles that try to defend the JEPD theory, the four source theory for the Torah. I really don't find it that convincing.
Well, no, and
yeah,
he doesn't really get into any arguments for this, and I've seen really good rebuttals to this hypothesis. If he would get into arguments for it, we could simply respond to it, but
yeah, that would make things a lot better, I think, just all around.
And Maximus, do you have anything you want to add? Is he there?
He might be away for a couple of seconds.
All right, well let's keep.
Sorry, my mic was muted.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't really have anything to add on this one. You guys pretty much covered it.
Okay, well if you want me to stop him, or just hit stop on the sidebar, and I'll hit stop for you. So let's keep going.
Deuteronomy, a strict and permanent covenant to Yahweh, as well as a complete rejection of other gods, is established. It is commanded of the Hebrews that they tear down the altars and smash the idols of other gods. In response to the discovery of Deuteronomy, Josiah and his court implemented merciless reforms that officially established Yahweh as the official God of Judah.
Go ahead, Vassal.
Okay, so he acts as though this is the first time in Israelite history where, like, this contempt for other gods was ever shown. Now, he may say that, like, in the Book of Kings and all the other places, this was just added by the Deuteronomists. But, again, that seems to sort of be, like, putting the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, you see it very commonly, especially in the Book of Kings, where there is, like, and especially in Samuel, like, the whole point of Samuel is, like, both books is King David's, like, establishment as king, and, like, him putting Yahweh above, like, him only, like, worshiping Yahweh. That's what you see consistent throughout the Book of Samuel. And in the Book of Kings, it's like, yes, you had bad kings, but then you had good kings, and the good kings were the kings who were, like, praised were the ones who were tearing down idols.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure he would just say that, well, those were all added. Those were the parts added in Judges, Exodus, Kings, Samuel, and Joshua.
Well, yeah, and he does do that. He just...
What I find in a lot of this sort of material is, I also find the same thing with groups like, Jesus Mythicists, is that they have this theory. They'll say, okay, this is how it happened, and then let's say if you bring up certain verses that really contradict their theory, oh, well, those were added later. Why? To presuppose the theory is correct, and if they now take that extra evidence, that makes your theory wrong, therefore that had to be added later, because otherwise your theory would be wrong.
And that's exactly what he's about to do in the last 4 minutes of this video. He just says that. So let's just keep rolling along and we'll get there,
Reformers also rewrote Israelite history.
There you go. We rewrote history. It was like right in the next line. There, yep. And here's my problem with this. If he rewrote history, how does he know they were polytheists prior to this?
Yeah, how does this guy know what was originally written in the places over, like, which was rewritten?
The other thing, he expects us to, for example, to have evidence of Abraham or evidence of Isaac or Jacob or something, but where's the evidence that these 4 separate streams had separate documents that they edited and put together? Where are those documents?
Well,
since that came much later than Abraham and Isaac, you would think that they'd have some evidence of that.
Well, it's as we said, it's a double standard. I've talked with this guy on Facebook before. The amount of evidence he puts on theists to prove their points is so unbelievably, you can't do it. You just can't do it. But notice what he's doing. He's just presenting this theory from Karen Armstrong as if it's fact. So it's a double standard. He doesn't have to give that much evidence. But when he talks to theists, well, they have to throw out unbelievably amounts of evidence. And it's just a total double standard.
IP, haven't you heard? Atheists don't have to give evidence because they don't have to prove everything. The burden of proof is always on the theist.
Exactly, yeah.
This is how things work.
Historical books of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings were revised according to the new ideology, and later the editors of the Pentateuch added passages that gave a Deuteronomist interpretation of the Exodus myth to the older narratives of J and E. The intense hatred of other gods by Yahweh is firmly established in the rewritten Hebrew history. The bloody God Yahweh is made even bloodier, as he is now said to have commanded Joshua to wreak genocide on the natives of Canaan for war.
Okay, where in the Bible does it say Joshua was commanded to commit genocide? I have asked skeptics this point over and over. They don't give me any verse. They just say, well, he was told to take over the land of the Canaanites. Yeah, because they were sinful and they were performing child sacrifice and all sorts of other terrible things. It was never because of their race they were attacked.
Yeah, people do that. Sorry.
Yeah, they never bring up the point where he says, well, you can't take it yet because they haven't sinned enough or something. Or, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's in Genesis when God is talking to Abraham.
Yes.
He tells them that...
It's a terrible double standard.
Yeah, it's, and the Bible never commands genocide, never once. It's always about bringing judgment upon people who are performing such evil, sinful acts like child worship, child sacrifice, and just unbelievably evil things. You would be like, oh, okay. I mean, I remember one time, I think Clay Jones cited Richard Dawkins and said that in a moment of clarity, you can't help but feel bad for God if the most righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah were Lot. And then you look at what he did. I mean, these were, so I mean, it's like, this is just God commands them to attack, therefore it's genocide. I mean, look at what the text actually says, and look at what was actually going on. So.
Worshipping other gods. Interestingly, despite the enforcement of this strict devotion to Yahweh, monotheism was still not established. The evidence of Deuteronomist passages like, "You shall have no other gods before me," indicates that even Josiah still believed in the existence of other gods. This was still polytheism. It was just a vicious form of monolatrist polytheism that vehemently rejected the worship of the other gods. But
okay, this is what we talk about, blending a little bit of truth with a lot of lies here. I mean, it's, yeah, we've already established they were monolatarists. That doesn't mean they were polytheists, the worship of several gods. The acknowledgement that there's other heavenly beings does not mean polytheism.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I've often said to atheists who say that, like, what if the Greek mythology is true? And I'd say, yeah, I'd still be a Christian. Like, because those Greek gods are pathetic material beings who would still be reliant on Yahweh.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, they're natural gods who need created. Yeah. Did you want to add anything there?
Something I want to add. Christianity's category of theism is actually more akin to the classical theism of Plato and Aristotle. This notion of one God who is the non-consuming source of all reality, not kind of the Greek idols people worship.
Exactly.
So I would actually compare it. The question I would compare is, how would you react if Plotinus's "the one" was true, like something along those lines, as opposed to Zeus or Hades or one god of that like?
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. I mean, and I know many Christians who would argue that a lot of these pagan gods are real in a sense; they were just demons. I mean, and I don't take that view specifically, but I mean, if they were found out to be true, I mean, that's just what would be interpreted as in Christianity. It's not an issue for us. No.
The stage was set. In 604 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar II rose to power in Babylon. It was well known at this time that Nebuchadnezzar sought to conquer Jerusalem. As his armies gathered and prepared, another prophet, Jeremiah, arose, once again crying that strict devotion to Yahweh and the rejection of other gods had been the solution to their problems. Except this new prophet was claiming that it was too late to do anything about it. Yahweh would use this foreign army as his instrument to teach his people a damning lesson. Like the prophets before him, he projected his own emotions, such as fury, onto Yahweh. As Jeremiah predicted, the fall of Jerusalem to Babylon was inevitable. The forces of Babylon were just too massive, and Jerusalem was just in too weakened a state. The temple was destroyed. The Hebrews were exiled from their country to live in Babylon. The Babylonian exile had begun. Their sense of defeat was devastating. Polytheistic gods in ancient Mesopotamia were associated with specific territories of land. When the Hebrews...
What were you saying there, Vassal?
Well, I just thought it was kind of funny how, like, I mean, this is one of those predictions where it's like, yeah, anyone could have said that, anyone could have predicted that, but I just thought it was kind of funny that he's talking about how a prophet was predicting this, and that's all he was talking about, and then it came true, like, while he was still alive.
Yeah, I know. Well, is that an actual true prediction, or was that added later? I mean, I've heard atheists go both ways on that, so...
Yeah, I don't know.
So...
Hebrews were exiled to Babylon. They felt they could no longer connect with Yahweh. How can we sing the songs of Yahweh while in a foreign land? Ezekiel, a prophet who arose among the exiled Hebrews, expressed how alienated the Hebrews had become. He too blamed their plight on the Hebrew people for lack of devotion to Yahweh. It was
Real quick, I mean, he's trying to say that Yahweh is just the God of the land of Judea and not the God of all the land. The reason why they're saying they cannot worship God in a foreign land is because they were out of covenant. The covenant they made with God was that they would inherit this land if they worshipped Him, and to be taken out of that land meant they were out of the covenant. They were no longer in covenant with God in that sense.
And and in the Torah, it often talks about how Yahweh would designate a specific place, aka the temple, for them to worship in. They didn't have the temple, and it wasn't like they couldn't worship Yahweh because they were in a different country. It was because they couldn't worship Yahweh in the proper way because they didn't have the temple. There weren't priests who could offer sacrifice in the temple in the ordinary way.
Right. And, this of course changed in the New Covenant, but the idea that it just means that Yahweh was a God of a land in Judea and not a God of other lands it's just taking the little bit and just building a giant case out of it, which is not necessary in the text.
Then, at a time when the Hebrew people seemed most crushed, at a time when it seemed certain that the cult of Yahweh would surely die, it instead did something that religion has done throughout history in order to survive. It changed. A new author, who scholars call Second Isaiah, arose, and his words were appended to those of the first Isaiah. I am the first, and I am the last. Besides me, there is no God. Monotheism.
Go ahead.
Okay. Why didn't these monotheists, like the first monotheists, why didn't they rewrite history? I wonder.
I know. Well, I mean, if
they seem to be a break in that tradition.
If it's so obvious that the text was changed to be monotheistic, why did they not edit out these other parts that he is using to try to show early polytheism?
Like, if they were editors, they did a horrible job.
Yeah.
Was born. From this new monotheistic culture, the priestly source P arises. Israelite history is rewritten once again. Exodus is rewritten by P to say that the El Shaddai worshipped by Abraham and the Yahweh worshipped by Moses were the same God. Any references to El Elyon are explained by P as merely different names for Yahweh. The entire book of Leviticus is authored. Genesis 1 is crafted as an improved monotheistic version of the Babylonian account of creation. Second Isaiah rewrites Babylonian myths that were attributed to Marduk, such as his defeat of the dragon Tiamat, attributing them instead to Yahweh. The Torah is rebranded by P to look as if it had always been monotheistic.
This is what we've gone over so many times already in this thing, is that, first of all, there's so many problems with this section. He's forgetting that there is no problem with the idea of Jews triumphantly reclaiming things of paganism and applying them to Yahweh. It's sort of like when the Persians called their emperor the King of Kings, and in the New Testament we hear it being applied to Jesus. It's like saying, you think your God is King of Kings, really Jesus is King of Kings. It's an act of triumphant reclaiming something. And once again, as we said earlier, how does he know, where's his evidence this was just rewritten? He doesn't really give any, he just assumes it's fact. It's a double standard.
Well, in all fairness, Jesus is just a myth constructed by Persian legends, so that's why we would have
had this conversation last night.
Yeah.
I know, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and it's like it's just the same stuff going through. It's the same double standard over and over.
In 600 BCE, the god of Western monotheism, the god of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, was born. Once I knew this, my entire perception of the Bible changed once again. Verses that never made sense before made sense now. This was the death blow of monotheism for me. It was the revelation that I could pick up any one of the millions of Bibles in America, from hotel rooms to Christian gift shops, and see its pages dripping with polytheism. I could see, with my own eyes, human beings giving birth to the monotheistic God.
Okay, so if that's what he needs to debunk his his belief in Christianity, then that's pretty bad. I mean, this is I went through this video and I saw a lot of points and I'm like, yeah, that would be expected if that would be and this is what he says pulled him away from Christianity. I don't even know.
It's funny how he says that reading the Bible in a new light is the death blow to monotheism. What? Okay. Even if Christianity was the only monotheistic religion, like we could forget about Islam or any other, or we could forget even about like Aristotle and like all the other philosophers who come to a monotheistic God. Like, what? That still wouldn't like be the death blow. At worst, that would simply just say, oh well, I guess that was the only lead I had for monotheism. Let me see if. Like, I would at least say, well, I wonder if there's any other reason to think that there's a monotheistic God.
And what bothers me is that did he even try to read rebuttals to this? Did he just read Karen Armstrong and assume it was true without any actual evidence? Because that's what he does at this end. He just says this was all edited and changed because Karen Armstrong says so, or whoever he cites says so. That's not an argument. I mean, there's good responses to this by Jewish and Christian scholars, and just to take their one side's argument and not listen to anyone else, it just shows you weren't even trying. Like, it's like if this is what convinced him, he wasn't trying. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's true.
Hey, he leaves very well-sourced Wikipedia articles down in the description. That's literally what his description is. He writes over them, well-sourced Wikipedia article about X, Y, and Z.
Albert, what are your thoughts?
It sort of reminds me, though, what you get in the whole Jesus mythicist thing, where someone will see something like zeitgeist and then say, well, I saw it there, therefore it's true. I can't tell you how many times I've been pointed to zeitgeist as evidence Jesus didn't exist. It's like, if that convinced you, really, if this is all it takes to convince you, then obviously, like you said, you weren't trying that hard.
No, and like when I was an agnostic, I spent several years trying to get good arguments against Christianity, and I did that by reading the actual Christians, like C.S. Lewis specifically, and trying to figure out how I could respond to this. Now, when I'm doing videos, I try to find good objections I can respond to, or if they challenge my view in any way. And I have found that good arguments that have challenged my views in some ways. And but I mean, you got to do a little bit better research than just reading one book by Karen Armstrong and assuming it's true and then moving on.
Well, the other thing is what you have to realize is that you can always tell one of these bad arguments, because what will happen is that they'll give an evidence. They'll say, okay, here's the evidence, like he's showing all this Karen Armstrong stuff. But there have been, since Karen Armstrong stuff has come out, there have been lots of responses by actual scholars, and he's not at all, doesn't even seem aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
He obviously hasn't looked into this very hard, because even if he were still convinced, he would at least have to address those arguments on the other side, which obviously isn't happening here.
No, exactly.
You have more. Like, this is just part. I mean, I watched part 2. I'm not sure if there's a part 3, but like, at the very least, make one video presenting your case and then make another video defending it.
Exactly.
Like, in a debate, you don't just get up. Well, this isn't a good example, but you don't just get up, say your opening statement, and then just completely forget about the rebuttal.
Yeah. Well, it would be. Let's say we were having a debate, and then I began by making my points, and then you got up and refuted points, and then I came back and just said the same thing over again.
Yeah. Maximus, do you want to add anything? I think you're mute.
Thus far, with Karen Armstrong, also with any form of research, you should rely on more than one source in general. Especially if you're going to make a video about the topic, but with regards to Armstrong in general, I've read a bit of her work on, what was it? It was actually her latest response to atheists, in fact, where she was actually defending theism. That one actually also wasn't good. I don't really consider her to be too
right?
She won't. I'm sorry.
Right.
Right.
Right is one thing. She's considered to be a very popular scholar. I mean, I'm in religious studies, and when one of our cohorts sorted her as saying that there was some kind of essence of religion, we all kind of, well, we didn't really take too kindly to it, because that's actually very debatable currently in religious studies circles. Most people in religious studies kind of think of religion as more of a lived experience that's intersubjective. There's no real essence to religion.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Armstrong isn't really that familiar with religious studies, so I'm really not... So I can't really speak on this book, because I haven't read it too in-depthly, but she doesn't really seem like someone who's read the literature, at least in other areas I'm familiar with.
Yeah, it's there's just so many issues. I mean, we could spend the next several hours going over it all, but I mean, for example, I know when I first encountered Karen Armstrong, she was she was trying to write the argument that when Jesus called himself the Son of Man, he was declaring his humanity because he's calling himself a Son of Man. And even Bart Ehrman points out that's not a good argument. When Jesus is calling himself Son of Man, he's referring to a divine figure from the book of Daniel. Like, those are her arguments. It's like they're not that good. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, closing remarks from you guys.
Well, the thing is, Karen Armstrong there's a particular line of scholarship that she agrees with, and she's a popularizer of that particular line of scholarship. She's not actually doing the scholarship.
Yeah.
She's making it accessible.
I actually hope that if Evidence sees this video, that he will make a response to it.
I would really enjoy that. Yeah.
I would love that. I would love for us, like all four of us, even if need be, to have like an actual discussion about these things.
I would love to discuss it with him. Yeah.
An upfront debate, but like maybe a video discussion, like maybe several videos back and forth, or blog posts, or things like that.
Oh, I would absolutely love that. Yeah, I would love to hear his response to this stuff. I mean, just the basic argument that, yeah, if you read the Bible, you're going to expect that the Israelites were chasing after other gods. I mean, the idea that Abraham was originally a pagan, I mean, that's expected. So, I mean, just anyone else have any more closing remarks? I'm done blabbering at this point. If anyone else wants to throw in any other things, and then we'll just wrap it up.
Yes. None of this actually disproves the truth of Scripture or monotheism. Good night, everyone.
Good night.